All right.
Hi guys.
Hello, everyone.
I am Casey Bowker, and I am a comic book writer. And with me,
I'm Darius Johnson. I am a comic book illustrator. Yeah.
and writer.
Yeah. Yeah. But right now, we're just going to concentrate on the illustration part.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
Guys, the way that we're gonna do this, it's very informal. If you have a question or you have a specific something you want to talk about, just unmute yourself and interrupt us if you have to. Sometimes we end up going out on tangents, but we're happy to answer any questions for you. And we'll be happy to talk to you guys. So we're going to talk a little bit about making comics.
Yes.
So I'll give you a little bit of background on myself, which is I have been writing my whole life in some capacity, usually just like short little stories for myself. And then I went to film school and wrote longer stories with the intention of doing movies. And then, for that, here we are years and years later, and I took some of those movie ideas and turned them into comic books, which a few years ago, I met Darius and decided to take one of those movies that I wrote and try to get it adapted into a comic book form because I like his artwork. So how long you been doing illustration?
Okay, so professionally, probably for the last 20 years off and on, got a chance to do, speaking of film, got a chance to do some storyboard work for some low budget horror films and stuff like that. Doing artwork for CD covers, all that kind of stuff. Drawing comic books, had a decent run in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. But I've been drawing since I was 4 years old. So yeah, been drawing for
lifelong passion.
Yes.
Lifelong passion. And for some of you guys who just joined, if you have a question for either one of us or both of us, whatever, just unmute your microphone and ask it. We're going to keep this thing real informal. So, we're talking about comic book creation, right? So we work on this comic book together. It's like a crime comic about a couple of detectives in
don't forget
Buffalo.
The horror.
Yeah, I'd say crime horror action down in so these two detectives who solve crimes in Buffalo, New York. So with that project, it comes this collaboration idea of me writing and then Darius taking what I've put on there on the page and bringing it to life. And I think what happens with comic books is it's a completely different medium than either. Than just writing or just drawing. It's storytelling where you don't have to have dialogue necessarily, or you can have a ton. It goes either way.
Yeah, it goes either way. Yeah.
Right now, especially, we live in a world where people are more accepting of comic books. You can't watch television or a movie nowadays without seeing a comic book adaptation. So when we were younger, we might have been able to get some cartoons, you know what I mean, of comic books and stuff like that, but we didn't really get the variety and the pop culture saturation that we have now, which is amazing as fans. We have a question already. So Draven and Chloe ask, how did you come up with your art style, and do you have multiple art styles? It's a great question.
Okay, so my
Can you show off
influences.
your art a little bit? Because your art style is
Okay.
very unique in that sense too.
All right. Well, so this is something that I was drawing earlier. So I just finished it. I did it in the first go around this morning. It's a character from our book, Detective Tyler. He's a bit of a jerk, but that's one example. Here's another. Photon. You might know her from Scarlet Witch.
WandaVision. She was in
WandaVision.
WandaVision.
Yeah. And I'm not going to show that one. And here is a painting that I did of Chadwick Boseman. So those are a couple of different examples of how I draw. The first was more of a typical comic book sketch, character sketch. The next one was a little more detailed, a little more, but still in the vein of drawing comic books. My influences are animation for the most part. To this day, I seek out animation for inspiration, particularly 2D animation. I love some of the old Disney cartoons just for the fluidity of the animation and how they captured human emotion and even with characters that were a mouse or chipmunks or whatever, and the action and how the movements. I try to place that into the things that I'm drawing, even if it's more, grounded. I still try to have it jump off the page. My style developed over the years of liking those things, finding like-minded artists people I feel like the same things that I like growing up, and seeing the things that they figured out before I did, and about drawing. And you should, as an artist, you should be constantly learning. I just spoke on this earlier about you have to invest in the process of creating your art. So that means just whatever free time you have is making art. And that doesn't mean that it's something that making something that you want to necessarily present. That's not the goal. The goal is doing the work, is taking the time to, because with each drawing, whether you realize it or not, you're getting better, because each time, the more you do it, the more you learn. So that's one of the things that I figured out, and that's how I came up with my style, is basically just constantly going at it. So I hope I answered that as best as I could.
That was beautiful. I really love your painting of Chadwick Boseman. That is so pretty.
Thank you. Thanks.
I'm a beginning painter myself, and my brother is really good at drawing.
Okay. That's cool. That's great to hear. Yeah.
It's something we talked about in the first session too, is that I think we all, as artists, whether you're a writer like myself or an illustrator like Darius, is that you start emulating your favorites at the beginning. Absolutely. You might even just straight up be copying them at first and trying to almost trace what they did and to try to nail that, which is not a bad practice as far as like writing or drawing or whatever. You're owning your craft that way. But at some point, you reach I would say this, at some point for most good artists, they reach a point where they say, now I go off on my own direction. Yes. Some people still try to copy the old guys. Yeah. And honestly, it kind of looks like someone copying, and I don't ever really super appreciate it, because it's like, well, that's cool. You can nail that look, you know, you can look like Jim Lee, for an example, or whatever, but like, what do you do? Like, what is your voice? Like I said, again, if it's on words, on paper, or if you're drawing, like, at some point you really do have to see, like, what's your own style. And what Darius was just mentioning is, like, then you just keep doing it. Then you just keep doing it, and you will get better. Just as anything, you know, just as if you were gonna run or play basketball or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to get better, and it just takes years and years, but it's fun, right?
Yes. You mentioned something that I want to touch on, is the tracing. So a lot of people knock tracing. I say early on, and particularly in something that you're not trying to pass off as your own, it's important to trace. Part of drawing is muscle memory. By tracing, you start developing the line works, the strokes that it takes. So you don't want to rely on that, but you want to. It's a great learning tool. It's not, and I'm for it as long as you're not trying to pass that work off as your own. It's all part of learning, though. If you're doing that, it is part of developing your skill. Because as children, one of the first things that you do, now, not everybody sticks with it, but everybody does it, is they make you draw your hand. And then you make that into a turkey or whatever. And it's one of the first things that you do when you're in pre-K or kindergarten or whatever. And daycare even, it's one of the first things that they teach you to do. And you're tracing your own hand. And it's a bit meta, but if you think about that, that's the start of all of that. And I think it's okay to learn. You're supposed to learn from those that come before you, those around you. It's how musicians start out. They start out playing other people's music. The problem comes in is when you don't think you're good enough to make your own. And I try to encourage everyone to feel good enough to make their own. You can, to not rely on where you started, and sometimes you just get comfortable. So it's good, like you were mentioning, getting to that point of saying, okay, I've learned what I can from this person. Now it's time for me to express my own voice. And that goes for writing, it goes for drawing, it goes for painting, it goes for musicians, whatever it is that you're doing, even if down to people that learn carpentry. You learn it from a master. You learn it from someone, but then you do have to figure out how you're going to go about it. And that is important. So, all right. Any other questions?
Yeah, you guys can shoot off questions either in the chat or unmute your mic, and we'll be happy to answer.
Yes, please interrupt us.
While we're waiting for interruption, one thing I wanted to do the share screen thing again. So you guys are here for comic books specifically, and I just want to show you guys an example of getting characters across, getting scenes across with some direction, and then without much. And how does that work? How do you take those words and turn them into something? So I'll show you here on the screen. So this is a scene I wrote, like an action scene with one of our characters. And I actually I highlighted this because I didn't show it the last session. So on page 5, I had a very specific look as to, these guys are in ninja type outfits with hoods, and it looks like they're aliens on their faces. So I'm not an artist. If I would have stick figured this to try to give it to Darius, he would have had no idea what I wanted, because I had a look in my head. And, I did add in a bunch of different things in here. So not only did I give him a description of what I wanted to see as far as the action and what I wanted those people to look like, but let me just show you this, because as we were just mentioning, you're going to have to use inspiration.
Yeah.
So I had to Google this. So this is the alien.
Google is your friend.
Alien scene here.
Yes.
This is what I wanted it to look like. I just Googled the alien, and then so this gives him inspiration as to what am I seeing in my head for the scene. And then finally, I will show you what it ended up being, which are these guys. So,
yes.
Which is exactly what I wanted, right? So, it's a little bit different when you're a writer trying to get things turned into bring it to life, because again, I have something in my head and I need someone else to help me with that. When you're doing both, that's totally different too. And you don't write comics the same way that I do. So no. Darius, he draws and then he writes, or at least he fills in the dialogue, whereas I have to write it all out. How is that process? Because I can't. Okay. I never wrap my head around when you tell me that. I'm like, this is crazy.
Okay, so what I do is I create myself a basic outline of the story I want to tell. So I do lay it out page by page as far as writing. Each page is detailed to a point. It's like I said, a basic plot outline for the page, just a guide of the story I want to tell, particularly because in this case, I know the characters there because I created them myself. And so it's a visual art form, making comics. So not everything needs dialogue, as you mentioned earlier. So if it's a particular conversation point I want to make, I'll write that out. But for the most part, I leave that open for later, because once it's all drawn out, because then maybe I want to make changes to that dialogue. If I draw the scenes, if I draw everything with the dialogue in mind, it in a way limits where the artwork can go. And I'm an artist first. So I like structure, despise constriction. So with that, I don't want to ever put myself in a boxed in situation. So when I write my stuff, I write it in a language, in a shorthand that I personally understand. so that's where that comes from. Yeah. So I hope that answered the question.
No, that's good. Yeah. Because I know I have had to edit afterwards. Yeah. In the recent comic that we just worked on, I wrote too much. And as a writer, you're always going to write too much. Always. It's constant editing. And I'm sure it comes into drawing as well.
Yes, it does.
Where you put too much out there and you have to scale it back sometimes. So, I kind of feel like our relationship's very symbiotic, where I'm letting you bring these characters to life. And they wouldn't come to life if I didn't write down what it is that we're writing. So, what I mean? Right. Like it's kind of like a cool, relationship in that way for the two of us, but just in creating in general, even if it's just you without collaborating with somebody else, it's then you're everything. Then you're the artist, you're the illustrator, you're your editor, as well. And that's
definitely
fun.
one I wish I could pass on, but yeah.
Yeah. So it's an interesting process, but you know, we enjoy doing it.
Yes.
So because we both are working in the space of comic books, as opposed to just straight up, you know, drawing portraits, you know what I mean, or scenes like that. And I'm not, you know, writing novels. Like, why do you think we're working in comic books as a means to storytell as opposed to something else?
Okay. First thing, it's a lot more fun than any of those other mediums. Secondly, the payoff of completing it and seeing what you created done is a lot faster. It's and so in that sense, it's more fulfilling. There's people that, you know, they were writing their novel and they were writing it for 10 years, and it's maybe 150 pages, and you say to yourself, well, what was going on there? Comic books is a faster process, at least it can be, and like I said, it's something that is, let's face it, we're both, we, you know, geekdom is in our blood, and I don't know who put it there, but it's there, and it's a lane for creatives of all types, really, to see their ideal fleshed out. And I think that's what drew us to it, is as a medium that you can tell all kinds of stories. Yes, the flashy stuff of superheroes, yes, that sits at the top. It stands out, but there's as you know, there's all kinds of stories. I mean, one of the longest running, Peanuts, Charlie Brown, and it's just, you know, that's a comic strip, but as a character it's lasted what, 60 years, you know, and that's not a superhero. It's for kids. Then you can tell pulp stories. You can tell there's books about the Holocaust.
Any genre, really.
Any genre. Yeah. Any type of story you want to tell. If you want to tell a story of how your grandparents met, you know, you can tell that story. If you want to jazz it up and put it in space, you can do that too. There's no other medium that you can do that. And then because of the thirst for new stories nowadays, you can see what you created in this medium be expanded upon into other mediums. The only other thing nowadays that I think even comes close is the world of scripted podcasts, where you can make a story, you know, have a couple of your friends come around and do voiceovers and act it out, and, you know, and find some stock sound effects, and, you know, and you tell your story. So this is as low budget as you can get, and but low budget doesn't mean low quality. At least it doesn't have to. It just means that you have to work and be more creative in how you bring your stories across. And I think that's what drew us to it, is that it's something that you can control. You can truly have your voice heard. The type of stories that you want to tell, as ludicrous as they may be, as poignant as they may be.
Yeah. Yeah. If any of you guys are comic book, you know, creators, like, let us know. You know, I'd be interested to hear what you're working on as well. Because it's always, I don't know, it's always cool to really talk to other people about what they want to bring out into the world. And I would say, to your point, it's probably the cheapest way to do it. Like animation is extremely expensive. Making a movie or TV show or all those kind of things are really expensive. Books are free. You know, you could write it on your tablet if you really wanted to. It's just a matter of the time and the effort to then get it out there. Granted, nowadays you could literally just upload it, you know, to a blog if you wanted to. But I think as far as even someone who's a writer, I still want to see these guys and gals, monsters or whatever. Like I want to see them come to life. Yeah, and I think like that's why comic books, they give you that opportunity to. I guess there's a little bit more of what do they call it? Like instant gratification, even if it takes a long time. It's more instant gratification than some of the other things. So that's why we do it.
As I said, it's the fastest way to see what you came up with become a bit more of in reality. It's 2D, but it's the fastest way to see something. You know, it's you know. Can you imagine if Stephen King wrote comic books and had a great artist attached to, you know, and
his son does.
Yeah.
No,
so so
great.
you know, so it's you know, and you now, I mean, the great thing about written literature is the fact that you get to use your imagination as the reader. That is a bit eliminated with comic books, but then from as I did as a kid, when you were reading comic books, you start imagining, oh, what if they did this as a movie? You start visualizing that. So the using your imagination doesn't actually stop just because the visual is already provided. From written to visual to your imagination, that part. But just another observation.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say with that, you guys too, is don't stop consuming different things. And what I mean is, there's times you're going to hit a writer's block or a drawing block, and the best way to get out of it that I have found is read something. Read a comic, watch a movie. Sorry, just consume something. Read a comic, watch a movie, TV show, podcast, whatever it is that you're into, because I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm just lucky that way, but it typically will either jog me into wanting to continue doing what I was working on, or gives me inspiration of, you know what, it would be really cool if I decided to, write this story about people who ride dragons after, reading this fantasy novel, and like, what would this comic book look like? You know what I mean? So I like, that's a real good way, is like, my mom might have made fun of me, for taking in all this stuff, not make fun of me, but then like, why are you watching all this stuff? Because like, it's inspiring in my personal opinion. So I think that's another thing to really never let that go, is keep consuming, like, to Stephen King, right? Even though he writes so much all the time, he's constantly reading as well. So he's constantly learning, and you won't stop learning, and you won't stop creating as long as you keep feeding that fire that you have. So
yes, you have to feed your imagination if you, as a creative. So that even so as a writer of fictional stuff, some of the best inspiration is nonfiction. And I say that because one of the most inspirational people I've ever read about was Nikola Tesla. And this guy, some of the stuff that he came up with sounds like something that's science fiction, and that's because it inspired a lot of science fiction. And so it's good to research other people, to be open to historical stories, and then you say, okay, well, maybe wouldn't it be cool if Abraham Lincoln was a vampire hunter this whole time? It sounds
which is a
silly
good,
and ridiculous. Yeah,
good
but
movie, good book. Yeah,
yeah, it's a good spark. It's a good, and you say, so you take those things and you say, okay, well, what was this? The whole, some of you are familiar with steampunk. It's based on real things. It's just, it's sci-fied up, but it's inspired from something that was going on at a time. It was the science of the time, and a lot of breakthroughs happened because of it. So those things, I would say, also help fuel your imagination. They can be jet fuel for your imagination and get you to where you need to go. So I just wanted to build on what Casey was talking about. Any questions?
Yeah, we have we end at 1:45. So
okay,
if you guys have something else to throw at us, please do, or else we'll keep rambling. We don't mind that at all.
Yeah.
I typed it in the chat. Yeah, it's really long.
Oh, you're gonna text it? Okay.
Okay.
I'll look in the chat.
Okay.
You can also ask. It's up to you.
Yeah.
However you want to.
It's up to you. Yeah.
It's like, do you use technology to draw or prefer to do handwritten drawings when making comic books?
I do a little bit of both as far as doing you mean for sound effects, like pow and bam and all that kind of stuff? Or do you mean actually actual dialogue?
I think they mean just the whole general, right?
The whole
general? Yeah, just in general.
It depends on what you're doing, what the look that you're going for. Because I know some people that have excellent handwriting, so it's actually looks better than anything that a program could come up with. That if that's the case, then I see no reason why not to do it.
Well, you use pencil and ink, but you also use Procreate, right?
Yeah, I use Procreate and I use Photoshop. So right now I'm using Photoshop for all my fonts and stuff like that. I'm drawing in Photoshop some of the sound effects and everything like that. Because some of the fonts don't do what I want it to do, or where I feel like I want it to look like. And it's just actually just fun, just making it up as I go along. So, because it's more creative that way. For me personally, say I want something to a sound effect of something going splat. Well, I kind of want it to drip more, so I'm drawing it myself, and then I feel like whatever you feel is best. That said, the comic books now, there's no real rules to it. You just want it to be legible. You just want it to be
well, your character
engaging.
Designs though too, Darius,
yeah,
you'll draw them right in pencil and ink, and then color them digitally.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's how he'll bring a lot of the stuff to life too. Is the ink is actually handwritten. Is that what you were getting at?
Oh, that's actually really cool. I never think of people doing two at once, like using technology and doing handwritten drawings.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah,
But that's
if you
actually
have the
quite
means,
cool.
yeah. Because if you have the means, why not? I mean, sometimes I ink digitally. I'll take a hand drawn sketch on paper. I mean, and I'll take a photo of it or scan it in, and I use a iPad, so I have the pencil and everything, and I'll use Procreate and I'll ink it and fully from there illustrate it. I've even done a couple comic book pages that way, illustrated and Procreate. Sometimes it's a little faster than actually doing it on paper. There's different techniques that I can employ in the digital medium. So yes, it's not you can do whatever you want. There is no rules. Whatever makes the vision come across. If you wanted to, one page is black and white, and the next one's fully painted. I mean, a full-on painting. If that's what you want to do, you just go ahead and you do it. There's nothing wrong with that. If it helps tell the story and bring across what you're trying to say,
yeah.
And if you're not sure if that is, just go ahead and do it. There's nothing wrong. This creativity is. There should be no box when it comes to it.
So no boundaries.
Very good question.
Yeah, no boundaries. Yeah. Yes.
All right. Thank you for answering.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Yes. Another question came through.
Okay.
What is your opinion on movies like Spider-Verse as well as Mitchell's versus the Machine? Also, is it okay if my brother shows off his dragons? Yeah, of course.
Yes.
You can show off your dragons. We love dragons.
Yes.
So I drew this.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's pretty good. Wow.
Yeah.
And
that's great.
Yeah.
And I've been using the book of Wings of Fire to help me.
Yes. Okay.
So I've also created different dragons using parts of the dragons that I've already done to create different dragons that are my own.
Oh, okay. That's perfect. Yeah. That's actually what you should be doing. You're learning, and then you're finding your own voice and creating your own characters, and that's what everybody does. There's an old saying of no idea is original. It's only what you do and what you've done with things that you learn. Everything starts out as inspiration from something else. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I think so. I love it, and keep doing what you're doing because that is amazing.
Yeah, it is.
But so just because you asked the question, and this is the last question we can answer real quick before we have to sign off, guys. Thank you for asking. Our opinion on movies like that. Spider-Verse is hands down. I don't even want to say put it like this, but it could possibly be the best animated movie of all time. And I only mean that not necessarily because I'm also just a huge Spider-Man fan, which I am a huge Spider-Man fan, but also as far as animation goes, it did things that we have never seen. Ever seen. So in that sense, it probably is the best animated movie ever made. And Mitchell's in the Machines, I haven't seen it yet, but I heard it's amazing. It's on my list to watch with my daughter probably this weekend.
Yes. So I'm going to co-sign everything Casey said, and I'm going to add what I was saying earlier. That's a prime example of they took very different mediums and they slapped them together and they made them work. So as a creative person, don't be afraid to mix media to get your story across, to create your art. It's you want it to be cohesive, but yes, that I haven't seen Mitchell versus the Machines yet either. It is on my list, but yeah, I really believe that that's the Spider-Verse really set the bar really high on all forms. So
all forms.
that's it, folks.
Yeah. So thank you guys for showing up today. Really means a lot. Keep creating, keep writing, keep drawing, and we'll see you when you're doing one of these things.
Yes. Yes. And don't be shy. Ask questions and be creative. Show your stuff off.
Yeah.
All right,
thanks.
folks.
I have
Bye,
a question
guys.
real quick.
Oh. All right.
Sorry.
Question. It's real quick. When you're creating a story, like like the very beginning, when you're thinking of an idea, do you have to agree an idea? Do you have to agree on what the story is going to be?
Well, when making comic books, it depends on if you're creating it together at the very beginning. Even like in comic books, you're often hired to do something. Like I was hired by Casey to work on the book that we work on together. But if you and a friend or you and a sibling are creating something together, it helps if you are in agreement with what the story is and where things are going. Talk it out. If there's something that you just really want and the other person doesn't, you have to talk that out and try to come to an agreement. Hope that answers your question. Was that good?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much for asking. Thank you guys again, and have a good rest of your weekend. Enjoy the sun.
You too.
All right. Bye.
Signing out.